Okay, in this video we're going to introduce the basic variation for the second question type in our argument section, the weakened question type. Okay, so here we have an example of a weakened question on the left, and let's take a look at the basic information for weakened questions. So first, for weakened questions, the content is always an argument. In order to weaken an argument, there needs to be an argument present. Now, that doesn't mean that it's an obvious or a simple argument. Part of the difficulty with these questions is the sometimes complex nature of the argument. The question has several different wording variations. So here we have the argument would be most seriously weakened if which one of the following were discovered. So we have seriously weakened, obviously lets us know that it's a weakened argument. We could also find which one of the following, if true, most seriously weakens or most seriously undermines the argument. The reasoning of the argument is most vulnerable to criticism because it fails to consider the possibility that, and then one of the answer choices, and things along those lines. Anything that asks you to weaken, to undermine, vulnerability to criticism, things like that will let you know that it's a weakened question. The correct choice for these questions states information that best undermines support for the conclusion. And these questions appear regularly in every test, and they often appear several times per section. So you're definitely going to have to get used to the weakened questions and to approach for doing them. So essentially, weakened questions test your ability to evaluate argument strength. When you weaken an argument, you give reasons to be skeptical about the conclusion. You undermine the support for the conclusion. Now, an argument will rarely be weakened by a choice that simply says that one of the premises is wrong. Instead, you will have information that questions the connection between premises and conclusion. For these question types, unstated information is key. Okay, so what's our basic approach? Well, essentially, the premises and the conclusion are the most important thing to analyze. So you need to have a good idea of how the premises support the conclusion and the unstated assumptions in particular, in order to be able to weaken the argument. First, you need to establish a clear picture of the structure of the argument, and in particular, you need to determine if there are any sub-conclusions. So you need to keep in mind what's being argued and how it's supported. Once you have an idea of the structure and how the premises support the conclusion, take a closer look at the move from the premises to the conclusion, and in particular, consider any unstated information that might be necessary. So you need to keep track of the keywords and concepts in the premises and conclusion, and to see if there's any information that is needed to bridge from the premises to the conclusion. Important things to keep in mind are that the author will simply assume something to come to the conclusion. They will overlook important information and they won't think about other possibilities, or they'll conclude something that's subtly different from what the premises support. So things of that nature, that move from the premises to the conclusion that supports the conclusion. Now, in terms of what are the right answers and what are the wrong answers, what are their characteristics, correct answers will provide information that undermines the conclusion. So once again, the correct choice will generally not say that a particular premise is wrong. Instead, it'll provide additional information that makes that conclusion less likely, and usually by bringing up an unstated assumption, by attacking an unstated assumption. The incorrect answers will not undermine the conclusion. Now, this is important. This doesn't mean that the correct answer will strengthen the conclusion. It may simply be irrelevant. And the wrong choices will also often attack something that seems to be related, but is in fact only superficially related. So they'll try and trick you by substituting in similar information as in the content. Okay, so the basic approach to doing these questions is to analyze the connection between the support and the conclusion, in particular thinking about the unstated information that can be questioned, and keeping in mind the move from premises to conclusion. So you need to pay attention to the subtle shifts in the concepts used in the premises and the concepts used in the conclusion.